Department of Education CTA Dharamsala on his second visit to Samboda Tibetan School, Missouri. It is our honor that the Department of Education Dharamsala has been consistently supporting us in the management of school through the funding and providing human resources. I am to highlight here a brief history of Honorable Sikyong for the information of students and staff of our school. Our school students, most of the students are Indian. Its total number of students are 383 in Indian, and 173 are Tibetan and Himalayan. So regarding the Honorable Sikyong, the Sikyong was born to humble family in 1967 in Tibetan refugee settlement Balakopi. He has been a bright student right from the school days. After finishing schooling, he joined Madras Christian College to do his graduation. He graduated with the flying colors. He has been the ardent advocate of Tibetan freedom movements activities during the college days. He actively
today, on this very fortunate day, being with us, our President, and I, on behalf of my dear students and staff, would like to extend a hearty welcome to our Honorable Sikyong Visit. Next, we have a Secretary, Department of Education, Tibetan Welfare Officer from Bigelow. So to begin our today's event, let me read out a little bit of programs. So first of all, school staff and students welcome. Next, a welcome address and a school report by school principal. Sikyong Visit STS, the Honorable President, will address the staff and student. Thank you speech by Mrs. tashDol.Vlog. And last, we have a group photo session with the Honorable President. So
with that, when we came in 1959 to India, our people had not been to India. They are not used to Indian food. They are not used to Indian weather. So many children died because of diet problems and weather problems. And later we were all put up in the foothills of Himalayas because our people had no knowledge or no skill whatsoever. The only thing we could do was hard labor. So the roads that you see in Chamba, in Dalhousie, in Manali area, in Shimla area, in Bumdila area, most of those roads on the Himalayas were built by the Tibetans initially, engaged by the Indian government. Okay? So because of the foresightedness of His Holiness, at that time no Tibetans thought that we would have to live in exile for 63 years.
And since then, the Central Tibetan Administration, or some others call it Tibetan Government in Exile, has been located in Dharamsala for the last 62 years. Okay? And when we came into exile, we never thought that we will have to live in exile for this long. It has already been 63 years. And when we first came in 1959, our people have not many Tibetan people have been to India, even though our language came from India. As now you are studying in Tibetan school, so if you look at the alphabets, it's Tibetan alphabets are ka, kha, kha, nga, cha, 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 nya, ta, 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 na, pa, 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 ma, ta, ta, la, wa. So very similar to Hindi. In Hindi you have a g extra, out of the four, 5 syllables. And you have more vowels in Hindi, a, e, u, e, o, aha, something like that I learned during my class 6, 7. This is all I remember now, maybe not the complete thing, but we have only 4 vowels. So the Tibetan script was derived from an Indian script called the Devanagari script. And it was picked up from Kashmir at that time in 7th century AD. When the Tibetan emperor sent his minister and some more students to learn Tibetan. And that was the time we invented the Tibetan script. 3 independent bodies for the election. These elections has to be held fairly. And also we have public service commission, so you have to go to all kinds of exams to get into civil service. And the Tibetan public civil service, not the Indian public civil service, for which you have to go to this academy once you get selected. To some, and the democracy that we follow is a combination of both the presidential and the parliamentary system, where the election of Sikyong has to happen in more than 20 different countries, because now Tibetans have less democracy in the world. We don't have political parties. So this is something that Acharya Vinoba Bhaveji had written as an ideology, but nobody had practiced that. We are the only one who is practicing it. So you don't have ruling party or opposition party. Uniqueness or peculiarities as you see it, but we have developed our own uniqueness based on the circumstances that we are in and the conditions that also force us to take certain decisions. But all in all, I can say that we have achieved much more than many other exiled communities, mainly because of the leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Right? So I'll stop here, and then if you have any questions, because the program says that we have to take a picture before the program ends. If you have any questions, I'll be very happy to respond from the Tibetan students or Indian students, it doesn't matter. Okay? Now the job of this school, not just this school, because this used to be the first school after coming into exile. 50 students were selected, all kids with running nose and torn cloth were brought up from here. And later all these people became responsible people within the administration. Today they are very old. I know some of them. They are all quite old. And now you are following in their footsteps. And for us, it doesn't matter whether the students are Indian or Tibetan, because the boundaries are created by human beings. Right? What matters is future for all of you. Right? And keeping that in mind, I would also advise the teachers also to follow that kind of thinking, and not to differentiate between students, and I hope it doesn't happen now, but you will also, since you are studying in a Tibetan school, you will also have more access to issues that, so in future, when you take up more important responsibilities in the community, then you can also think about helping us. Because we are refugees, right? We are refugees, but we are providing education to more than 6,000 Indian children. That's including the Himalayan children. And in the monasteries, we have about 288 monasteries that are registered with the Department of Religion and Culture. And the number is about 42,000 monks, nuns and tantric practitioners. And that number has not decreased over the years. But what has decreased over the year is the total number of Tibetan.
Aishnav from class 12C. And my question is, as we all know that Tibetans have come from China from refugee, means Tibet from refugee. But the main question is that what is happening on the ground level to get the lands back? Because about this Tibetan Free Tibet movement, there is not much activity on the internet as well. So, what is actually happening?
Okay. Now inside Tibet, I keep telling the international community, please take a seat. I keep telling the international community that we are dying a slow death. We are like being poisoned slowly and dying a slow death. So when I say slow death, we're not just talking about the life of people inside Tibet. We are talking about the very identity of the Tibetans. So when we talk about the identity of the Tibetans, then it concerns the Tibetan language. Because Tibetan language, even if it's derived from Devanagari script, is very rich. So just recently, one of the monks in Dharamsala published a 223 volumes of Tibetan dictionary. Just dictionary, 223 volumes. And that itself is testament to the richness of Tibetan language, right? And since Buddhism is also rooted in the Tibetan language, because we studied Buddhism from Tibetan language, the Chinese government at present, under President Xi Jinping, follows this policy called one nation, one culture, one language. Now, if this is something such kind of policy is implemented in India, you will have serious problems because India is full of diversity. You know, so many regions, so many languages, so many cultures. But the whole world is embracing multiculturalism. You know, different cultures coming together, melting pots like the United States, and you have very good examples in federal setups with multiculturalism in Canada or Belgium or any other countries, because people are going from places. I was told about academic discourses in China as to who is a real Chinese, whether it's the Han Chinese, are the Manchus Chinese, are the Tibetans Chinese, are the Mongols Chinese, or not, because now many of these areas are conquered by China and ruled by China. Now, if Mongolia is part of China, let us say if the Mongolians are Chinese, then the Chinese can claim half of the world, because Genghis Khan invaded half of the world. You know, so those discourses will keep on going. But right now, under President Xi Jinping, more than 78% of the Tibetan children are put in colonial boarding schools, away from their family, away from their languages, away from their culture. For the Tibetans in the next 1 or 2 decades, if this policy is pursued by the Xi Jinping government in his 3rd term, and that might follow into his 4th time also, then we will land up in serious problems. At one time, I used to fear demographic aggression from Chinese side, because they are 1.4 billion and we are only 6 billion. When I explain about Tibet to smaller children, I tell them that in our prayers we say Kangri Rave Kobe Shinkham Jong. So that's the heavenly abode surrounded by snow mountain ranges. So Tibet is surrounded by snow mountain ranges from all sides. You can see from the south the Himalayas that we share with India and Nepal and Bhutan. And we have more than 3,600 kilometers of border with India, which is still called as Indo-Tibetan Border Police and Border Force, not Indo-China Border Force or Indo-China Border Police. Indian government still has kept the same name like that. So this is one of the major problems into the future in 1984. It did not happen in 1984, but this time, as of today, as we speak today in 2022, Chinese government is doing the same thing to create a child. Everybody claps. I was telling the same thing to Tibetan Homes Foundation, because there are too less people who ask questions, so you find questioners very valuable that you have to clap all the time. Please.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir. First of all, I would like to thank the school for giving one wonderful opportunity to interact with the Tibetan president of Sikyong Visit. My name is Kumon Chu, and I'm class 12 science. So you have seen that most of the students in school are from Himalayan region. So Himalayan region, after the class 10 pass out, and class 12, Himalayan student does not have any scholarship from the Tibetan side. If we have a scholarship, then we get some background support to achieve our ambition. So why we don't have any scholarship, especially for the Himalayan region here, so like Ladakh, Arunachal Pradesh, and Shimla. So why?
That you should ask your state governments. as to why they are not doing it for you.
And Tibetan itself, we are studying right in Tibetan school.
But that doesn't matter, no? That doesn't matter. Because you are Indian citizens, right? Whether you are going to a Tibetan school or whether you are going to an Indian school, it should not matter. Your government, who is supposed to take care of you. So if it is Ladakh students, it has to be taken care of by the Ladakh government. That's why I keep telling Ladakh Hill Council. Earlier, when Ladakh was part of Jammu Kashmir, they didn't have much budget. Now they are receiving more than what they could spend. So that's why you should listen to my talk, what I said before also, no? We are refugees. When I go to foreign countries, I go with both my hands stretched. One for political support and one for monetary support. We have no taxation. Whatever Tibetans contribute, as of today, how much the Tibetan contributes accounts for our total expenses. It's only about 9%. If we are spending 100 rupees, only 9 rupees come from the Tibetans. The rest of the 91% we have to beg all the time. And when we beg for the Tibetans, we are refugees, it's easier to get sponsorship. But when we beg for Spiti people or Bhutanese people or Nepalese people or, Sikkimese or Arunachali, then they say they are from independent countries. How can we support independent countries, students from independent countries? Even now, we feel shortage of funds. We have to keep begging all the time. So the onus of your education should be on the state governments. That's why we say at school level, we will provide the education if you are willing to study in a Tibetan school with the support of Indian government or without the support of the Indian government or those funds we receive directly and we spend it on you. So beyond that, if we have to support, we need the money. We don't have the money. If we have money, then we can spend for everybody. Then it's not a problem. The resource is always a problem, both financial and human. So we are only 130,000 Tibetans in exile. India, Nepal and Bhutan about 80,000. Rest of the 50,000 Tibetans are elsewhere in Europe and North America and Far East countries. So for us, our main responsibility is to resolve the Sino-Tibet conflict, that is one thing, and the other is to look after the welfare of the Tibetans in exile. Now I have that many number of requests for funds, and we have to keep begging all the time. And I have to now relocate about 2,000 families with about 5,000 people who doesn't have any homes. Tibetans who came from Tibet in the 80s, 90s and 2000s were not provided with any land by the Indian government. So we have to relocate them in the compact communities. And for that alone, even if we don't pay them full amount, even on a cost sharing basis, I have to gather about minimum 15 million US dollars. And where will we get that money from? So we have a lot of constraints. At the school level, we are trying to do as much as we can. But at the larger level, when you go to universities, then it has to be your government who should support you. Indian Puranics and Indian ancient wisdom also espouses. Okay? Okay, so nice to meet you. And thank you for the opportunity for me to speak to you and interact with you in as little time as possible. But I hope it did help you to understand our cause and our situation better. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for our Honorable Sikyong for your kind words and about the Tibet and the Tibetans.
야, 다 Sikyong Visit Sikyong Visit 온다. 대구를 싱해. 어때? 나와장사다. 시리도 고마 참아라. 아. Terus Sikyong Visit di sini tadi doji sama hanze tabdagi gegen leje sama berda nang de shada kan sani hanze kita tagi shu sinemin de sani da